Sorry. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all well. Welcome to our first live Q&A session for the Ignite Culture Fund. My name is Maz Masai. I work for Hiva Fund as a researcher, but for the purposes of this project, I am the project officer. And further, for the purposes of this call, I will be the moderator for today's session. I would also like to introduce some colleagues who will form part of the panel team that will be responding to your questions today. So I will start our introductions with members of the HIVA team. So I'll call upon my colleague Wakiru Njuguna to introduce herself.
Thank you, Maz. Hi, everyone. My name is Wakiru Njuguna, and I work with Hiva Fund, and I'm also part of the team supporting the implementation of the project. I'm looking forward to engaging with you all.
Thank you, Wakiru. Kendi?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kendi Kamwambia. I'm the Support and Compliance Manager at Hiva Fund and also for this particular project. I'm very happy to be with you all today, and I'm looking forward to having a lovely engagement with all of you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kendi. Olivia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia. I am part of the communication team at Hiva. I'm also helping to host things in the background for today's session. That's why I'm the invisible face, but I'm here and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. We also joined by members of British Council. British Council are our partners in the implementation of this project, and we are joined by two individuals. The first one being Dionis, who I will let introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. My name is Dionis Ndungu, as you've heard. I am the team leader for this project, working with the British Council, and I'm really happy to be here, happy to answer all your questions.
Great. Thank you, Dionis. And we also have Eric Onyango on the call from British Council.
Oui, bonjour à tous les créatifs. Ravi de faire votre connaissance, même si c'est virtuel. Moi, je suis manager de ce projet Ignite Culture et je suis vraiment content que vous êtes avec nous et je serai vraiment aussi content de répondre à vos questions. Merci.
Thank you. Eric was wonderful enough to do an introduction in French. So we hope that all the French speakers on the call enjoyed that introduction. Also, I had mentioned this earlier in the call, but I'll mention this again. We have two features that are available to the attendees today. The first one that I'd like to highlight is the Q&A feature that's in your Zoom. If you look at the bottom row of your Zoom, you should be able to see a Q&A tab. You can send in questions using that tab, and we will respond to that to those questions at some point during the call. Also, if you'd like to listen to this call in French, there's an interpretation feature at the bottom of your Zoom window, and you can access that to either turn on or turn off the French stream of this call. I'd just like to post the agenda for today's call to everyone so that you can be aware of our schedules and timings for the day, but I'll just read it out for everyone's benefit. So we were supposed to start at noon, but we started a bit late. We've already covered greetings and introductions from the British Council and the HIVA team. Next will be a fund highlights presentation, which should last about 5 minutes, and I will do the presentation myself. After which we shall respond to the questions which we received either via email or through our social media pages, and that we've allocated a time slot of around 15 minutes. And then after that, we will go to responding to any questions that we have received during the session, during this session. So any questions that come in or any questions that will come in through the chat box, and we'll also give you an opportunity to sort of engage with the panelists during that session. And lastly, we will begin closing our call at around 1:30 to 1:45. although we had stated that the call can end at 2 p.m., if we do receive a high volume of questions, then of course we will extend the time needed to adequately respond to the questions. If for everyone's benefit, the agenda is in the chat box. I will now begin our presentation on the fund, and then we can go into questions. So let me just share my screen and we can start that. I hope my screen is visible to everyone. Olivia?
Yes, all good.
Great, wonderful. So I just wanted to give a top level introduction to the fund. This presentation will cover what the fund aims to do, who is eligible, and what value chains we aim to work with, and also what kind of support you can expect from the fund as an applicant or a grantee in the event that you are successful. So we are in the second year of our implementation. We did our first cohort last year, and they are currently rolling out their projects as we speak. We have a total of 19 successful grantees from last year's cohort. We received around 360 applications last year, and we were able to narrow it down to 19 successful organizations. And so this year, we're also looking to have a short list of successful grantees by around January of 2023. So the objectives of the call, of course, for all who may not be aware, we are part of the Global ACP EU Support for Cultural and Creative Sectors program. They have a program running in Central Africa, Southern Africa, Western Africa, as well as Caribbean and Pacific clusters. We are part of the Eastern African cluster, which has a list of 14 countries. You can get more information on the countries that are eligible for the funding on our website, www.hivafund.com, which I will ask my colleague Olivia to put in the chat box. You can navigate to the page that has information on funding and specifically Ignite Culture funding, and you can see the list of eligible countries there. So the purposes of this call is to provide support for cultural and creative industries by way of grant financing. So we will be conducting an open call for applications, after which successful organizations obviously benefit from a grant ticket that includes business support for grantees and also wider ecosystem support for all the beneficiaries to better deliver on their projects, as well as improve the capacity of their organizations to engage in cultural and creative practice. So the objectives of the fund are to increase the quality and quantity of cultural and creative goods produced in Eastern Africa, to improve the cultural and creative education and skills building opportunities. So we have a huge skills gap component within the fund, to also improve the access to local, regional, international, and digital markets. And lastly, to increase visibility of cultural and creative workers in the region. Of course, if you visit our website again, www.hivafund.com/igniteculture, and this information is also contained on the BC website, and we will be putting links to both these avenues in the chat box. You can get a better understanding of the four main objectives of the fund. As I had mentioned before, the fund is open in 14 countries, and we have a list of 9 CCI value chains that are eligible. For those who may not know, CCI in our case stands for Cultural and Creative Industries. So we are supporting at least 9 cultural and creative industry subsets, and I will get to them later. And what's accessible, there will be accessible grant financing. In terms of how we are conducting the grant financing, we have it available in 3 tiers. So the first tier is a fixed amount of 30,000 euros. The second tier is any amount between 31,000 to 90,000 euros. The third tier is any amount between 91,000 to 180,000 euros. So organizations must be registered, and you can find more information on the types of registration that are eligible for the fund on our website as well as on BC's website. And you must have handled at least 50% of the amount that you are requesting for within the cultural and creative industries during the periods of 2017 and 2018. So who can apply? Any organization or business. Olivia, okay, great, sorry. So who can apply? Any organization or business registered on or before 31st December 2017. And which value chains are eligible. So the first value chain we have is audiovisual and interactive media. So any business or organization or sole proprietor who's involved in film, TV, radio, podcasting, vlogging, video games, virtual reality, augmented reality, and new media is eligible. Just as a caveat, the fund does not cover film production per se. We support post-production of films and we support pre-production, but actual production we do not support. And there are other EU funds that are open currently that do support film production, and we will put those links in the chat. And then we have the second value chain, which is books and press. So anyone who's in books, newspapers, magazines, other printed matter, ebooks, physical libraries, virtual libraries, book fairs, and so on and so forth. The third value chain is creative and cultural education. So anyone who's engaged in trainings, workshops, curriculum development for cultural and creative practitioners and sectors. Then we have cultural infrastructure, where we'll be dealing with physical infrastructure as well as digital infrastructure. One of the questions we have already received is, can an organization receive funding to create a platform? So that counts as digital infrastructure for us. So I've already answered one of the questions that we've received, but that's what we consider when we talk about digital infrastructure. These are video on demand platforms, music streaming platforms, websites, marketplaces, digital marketplaces, and so on and so forth. With regards to physical infrastructure, we do not support the purchase of any buildings. What we support is, for example, renovations of existing physical structure that is used for creative or cultural practice. So for example, if you have a theater and you would like to spruce the theater up or do some renovations, then this fund can help you with that. If you have a studio and you'd like to purchase some more equipment so that you can do better recordings, this fund can help you with that. But we cannot engage in the purchase of any physical buildings under this fund, or construction of any physical buildings under this fund. Then we have cultural and natural heritage, where we support museums, archaeological and historical places, cultural landscapes, natural heritage, archives, preservation work, cultural food and cuisine, hair and beauty and cosmetic products. And of course, as long as they have a cultural leaning towards them. Design and creative services, where we work with fashion, apparel, accessories and design, interior design, decorative home, graphic designs and architecture. Then we have intangible cultural heritage, where we look at oral traditions and expressions, rituals, languages, social practices, food and cuisine, beauty, cosmetic practices. Then we have performance and celebration, where we are involved with performing arts, recorded music, festivals. So if you run a music festival, a film festival, theater, poetry, etc., any festival that's in the cultural or creative sector, we are likely to support. Fairs and feasts as well. And lastly, we have visual arts and crafts, where we're involved in supporting fine arts, so galleries and the likes, photography and crafts as well. Sorry. So what to expect for the second call? We opened our call on 6th of July. And well, week one, we had opened both the English and French application form, and we've also provided support in terms of supporting material and an application video, which I will urge all of you to engage with before you apply for the fund, because we have some really crucial information for all of you there that will help you in structuring your application. Then in week 2 and 3, which is currently what we are in now, we will conduct an online webinar and live Q&A session, which is what we're doing as we speak. And then we will receive applications up until the second week of August. I believe that will be August 12th is when we're closing. And then we will go into a 5-step application review process where we will start with the initial sieve, which checks at least low-level eligibility. Then we'll go into business panel, which looks at your financials. Then we'll go into the creative panel, which looks at the strength of your idea, the project, and how you presented it. Then we will go into the pitch. Any business that makes it through the first 3 panels will then be invited to do a pitch or to the pitch panel. And then after which you'll be informed whether you will receive funding or not based on your performance in the pitch. So all these processes, the review, as well as shortlisting and the final award will now culminate in Q1 of 2023. So any period between January and March of next year is when we will announce the final awardees for this year's grant. Thank you very much. That is my presentation. I will end it there. If you have any questions linked to the presentation I've just conducted, please send in questions using the Q&A feature. A point of correction, the fund will be open from the 6th of July up until 17th August 2022. And there's a list of countries that are eligible that have been provided in the chat by our comms lead, Olivia. You can have a look at that. And there's also links to the fund information both on the British Council website. Actually, we've just linked the one to the British Council website. So we have that in English as well as in French. I will now begin going through some of the questions that we received online. And we will start with questions to do with program implementation or other eligibility to the program. So I will tackle the first set of questions with my colleague Wakiru. So just allow me to pull up those questions so I can begin. There we go. Our first question is from Engule Ben, and it is for my colleague Wakiru. What do you mean by creativity and culture?
Sure. So what we mean is we are accepting applications from businesses or organizations that are working in the line of anything to do with generating cultural goods or services. And by culture, we mean anything promoting a certain country's culture or a community's culture, and it is in line with specific value chains. So I will just read them for you. And I think Maz has also just taken us through this. So we have cultural and natural heritage. So if you're working in museums, any archaeological, historical places, cultural food, if you are working to produce cuisine for a specific culture or to preserve certain methods or processes that are done in specific cultures, you can apply. Again, performance and celebration. So if you are organizing any festivals, recording music, fairs, whether it's festivals to do with hair, beauty, music, so anything that lies within the value chains that Maz talked about, you're eligible to apply. We also have cultural infrastructure, and that's physical and digital infrastructure. Maz mentioned that we are not supporting building, like putting up a building or buying a building. However, if you already have like a theater or a museum and you'd like to renovate it, then you are eligible to apply. We also have visual arts and crafts. So anyone in fine arts, visual arts, photography, handmade items, you are also eligible to apply. We have books and press, and that's, you know, anyone in the line of newspapers, magazines, whether it's digital or I guess hard copy, physical kind of platforms, other printed matter like ebooks, libraries, whether they are virtual or physical libraries, and then book fairs. So if you're in that line, you're also eligible to apply. Audiovisual and interactive media. We have film, TV, radio, we have podcast, that's in the line of new media. Vlogging, so if you are supporting vloggers or, you know, people in the new media space, whether it's maybe supporting them with capacity building skills, business skills, or, you know, specific technical skills, whether you're supporting them in accessing markets or to be able to be competitive in this day and age. AR, that's augmented reality, virtual reality as well, whether it's in the line of creating games in the VR or AR kind of line, you're also eligible to apply. And then we have design and creative services. So we have fashion, we have apparel, we have accessories design, interior design, architecture, decorative home. So whether you're in the interior decor space, maybe making furniture, graphic design and architecture, like I said, you're also eligible to apply. And then we have creative and cultural education. And the thing about this one is it cuts across all the value chains. So you could be supporting, I don't know, architects, you could be supporting people in the digital media space in terms of training, workshops, or curriculum development. You could be supporting writers, maybe having residencies of some sort. Then this is also something you could apply for. And then we have intangible cultural heritage, and these are oral traditions and expressions, rituals, whether you're looking to document these rituals or expressions, whether you're looking to bring them to the forefront and maybe elevate them in some kind of way, languages, social practices. So anything to do with preservation of cultural activities or cultural expressions or traditions. Food and cuisine, like I had said earlier, hair, beauty, whether you're documenting how a certain community used to do something or used to have certain traditions, you know, to probably promote different things. Hair, beauty, and cosmetic practices, you're also eligible to apply. So we are looking at a wide array of activities within the creative industries. And like I said, these are activities that are based on cultural values or any other, you know, artistic kind of like individuals or groups. So it doesn't have to be groups and it doesn't have to be individuals, could be either or both. And then if there anything to do with expression of these artistic outputs, then you are in the right place.
Thank you, Wakiru, for that very comprehensive answer. I think we'll just focus for now on the questions that we've received from Facebook, and then I'll move to the other social media platforms that we received. So while we are still on the questions we received from Facebook, I have a question here that I will throw to my colleague from our finance and compliance team, Kendi. And the question is from Abimana Chankad, and I apologize if I've gotten that name wrong. And the question is, are the organizations registered in March 2018 eligible to apply? I mean, the date of registration being March 2018, but for example, we got a registration at that time, but we had begun working from September 2017. So this organization had begun its operations before they got registered. They began the operations in September 2017, but got registered in March 2018. The question is that organization eligible, Candy?
Thank you for that question. So here is the long and short of it. The criteria is very stringent and it's very exact, that the registration has to be on or before 31st of December 2017. And so unfortunately, if the official documents don't show that you are registered before that cutoff date, which is 31st December 2017, then unfortunately, even if you were working before and you were in operation before that deadline, then you do not qualify because you do not meet the criteria. So unfortunately, there's no wiggle room around that. The criteria is very specific, that your registration documents should bear the date before the deadline for you to be considered eligible. So that is the long and short of that answer. If your registration documents don't bear that deadline or are not registered before that deadline of 31st December 2017, then unfortunately you are not eligible.
Thank you very much, Candy. But for anyone on the call who was registered later, there's still a way for you to be able to access the program. We'd like to bring to everyone's attention the fact that partnerships are eligible under this fund. So what that means is if you are a younger organization, for example, if you were registered after 2017, after the deadline, which is 31st December 2017, you can still take part in the program as long as you partner with an organization or a sole proprietor who's in cultural and creative practice, who was registered before 31st December 2017. Of course, in a partnership of this nature, the person who meets the registration requirements would be the lead applicant, but you can still structure a program that allows a collaborative effort for you to sort of actualize your goals as an organization or actualize your goals as a project and reach your target beneficiaries. So for younger organizations, do not lose heart. There's still a way into the program via partnerships as long as you find a partner who has met the eligibility requirement in terms of date. Again, thank you very much for that answer, Candy. Let me get the third question from Facebook, which is still to you, Candy. Why audited financials between 2017 and 2018 only? The question is from Frank Mgimwa.
Thank you, Frank, for that question. So for you to qualify for the funding ask that you're requesting, you must have demonstrated to us that you've handled at least 50% of what you're asking for. Say, for instance, if you're asking for 180,000 euros, you must demonstrate to us that you've handled at least 90,000 euros in a period of 2 years within a creative and cultural related project. So the audit becomes very essential in verifying that you have actually handled or implemented a project worth half the amount that you're asking for. So that's where the audit becomes very crucial. And the reason why we are focusing on 2017 and 2018 is because the last 2 years were COVID years, and for the most part of the creative enterprises and the cultural practitioners, these were not very good years in terms of projects implementation and how much money was going through their books. So we felt that the COVID years are out of question, and then EU had prescribed that we stick to the year 2017 and 2018. We can only speculate why, other than COVID being the reason, we can only speculate why those 2 years were the most, the years that they decided or settled on. But the reason why at least the most recent audits are not, we are not looking at the most recent audits because those audits have been affected or at least have been conducted during the years that we feel most of the practitioners were negatively impacted in terms of their revenues, in terms of their implementation. And so we feel that it would be unfair to gauge their ability of the funding us, or at least the amount that they'll be able to ask for during or demonstrate that they've handled during those COVID years will be less as compared to maybe the years where they were thriving. And we think 2017 and 2018 or rather years before 2020 were good years, and so EU did prescribe that we settle on 2017 and 2018 as the years to consider when basing how much someone should access as financing, based on them having demonstrated that they've handled at least 50% in our CCI project previously.
Thank you very much, Kendi, for that response. I hope anyone also with a similar question feels that they have been adequately responded to. And then now we'll go to our last question from Facebook, which will be tackled by our colleague from BC, Dionys. And the question, or rather the statement is, I can't see South Sudan on the list of eligible countries, and that is from Winnie Raymond. So I'll invite Dionys to help us with that question.
Thank you, Maz. Thank you, Winnie, for the question. This program, as you've seen from Maz's presentation, is a global program working in Africa, in the Caribbean, and the Pacific countries. And so in Africa, it was a build on to another engagement that the EU had in the sector, where they were supporting access to markets. So working with those countries that they had worked in, now they were then moving to the next step to build on that work that had been done before as a result. So that's the reason why then South Sudan wasn't part of that group. However, that doesn't mean that in the future, with the success of this engagement, particularly this program, it doesn't mean that then South Sudan will not be included. In the meantime, Winnie, maybe you could let us know what kind of sector you're in, and if you could probably, or if you know people in the eligible countries like Sudan or Kenya or Uganda around us where you could have partnerships, probably we could look at that and see how we can support what it is that you want to do. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dionys. Now we'll move to some of the questions that we received on Instagram. And for everyone who's sending questions either via chat or in the Q&A feature, I'd just like to let you all know that we will get to those questions once we finalize responding to the questions that we received via social media and email before this call. So we are giving those questions priority, and then we'll come to the questions that we are receiving in the Q&A feature right shortly after. So the first question is for Wakiru, and the question is from Wanya Gituku on Instagram. And her question, or their question rather, is a PR agency that does work for musicians, and in brackets entertainment and PR, and lobbying and advocacy, are they eligible to apply?
So yes, you are eligible to apply. One of the things that's very important for us is that you have worked within the creative and cultural industries in those 2 years that we have mentioned, which is 2017 and 2018, because then we are going to use your audits to determine that. So as long as you demonstrate that you have worked in cultural and creative industries before, then you are eligible to apply, and that what you're applying for must be in line with the value chains and in line with the sectors that we have mentioned. So yes, you can apply as long as you're able to demonstrate your previous work in cultural and creative industries.
Great. Thank you, Akiru. And the second question from Instagram is from Musau, and their question is to Kendi. What is the way forward for Talented Collections? I believe that is the name of their organizations that do not have a paper trail. So I believe this is in reference to either, this could be, I'll interpret this as a formality question. So maybe they're not properly formalized. We can assume perhaps they may not have registration documents, or in the event that they do have registration documents, perhaps they do not have a paper trail that can demonstrate their financial capacity. Yeah.
So the paper trail is very important because for us, that's what we use to determine how much funding ask you should draw down or you should be accorded. It helps us verify and conduct due diligence against your organization. So for maybe like a small company that's still in its infancy and hasn't really formalized really well, or hasn't formalized appropriately, our advice would be that you partner with an already existing company that has structures in place. So if you collaborate together, then the head, or rather the contract will be given to the company that's more mature and well formalized. And so for us, we'll be able to mitigate like the risks that are involved. The project will be able to at least have some certain degree of certainty in terms of proper project management, by relying on the head contract holder, who is the bigger organization or the bigger partner who has formalized structure. So my advice is the portal is very important, even as you work towards formalizing your business. Let formalization be an aspect that you actually aspire to, and you look forward to having around having proper structures within your business. But in the meantime, if you want to apply for this particular project, then my advice would be to collaborate with an organization that's already well formalized and already has structures in place and paper trail, with a proper paper trail system.
Thank you very much, Candy. And that's we can now move on to the questions that we received. Online. I mean via email. One of the questions has already been responded to by Candy very comprehensively, but I'll read it again. Good morning. Our company was registered in 2016, but did not start business until September 2019. As such, we only have financial statements starting September 2019. Do we still qualify? And if we qualify, which year's financial statements should we provide? So I believe Candy had already responded to a variation of this question, and that would be the response that holds for any question with regards to what year of financial statements are eligible and what year of registration is eligible. But for the sake of clarity, maybe you can just give a brief response because those are the two primary questions being asked by this individual.
Sure. So on the registration, the deadline or the last day that a company, for the company to qualify, must have been registered by is the 31st of December 2017. So if you're registered from 1st of January 2018, unfortunately, you're not eligible. What you can do is partner with an organization that was already existing before 31st of December 2017. When it comes to the audit years, or rather the audit that we're looking for, or rather we're looking at, is the audits for the year 2017 and 2018. Reason being, the most recent audits, we know, or we speculate, that they've been negatively affected by COVID, and so it will lead to organization really drawing down a small amount of money as compared to maybe the years that they were thriving. And we assume the years that they were thriving is the years before 2017. So that's 2019 going backwards, but the years selected by EU are 2017 and 2018 for this analysis, for this evaluation.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you very much. That concludes the questions that we had received via email or via our social media platforms. We will now begin tackling the questions that we have received during this session. And before I go there, I see there's an individual by the name of Benda Brian who has their hand up. Do you mind putting your question? They've put their hand down. Okay, great. If anyone has any questions, you can always send them either using the Q&A feature, or you can send them in the chat box. So I will now start on the questions we've received in our live Q&A. And the first question is for Wakiru. And the question is from an anonymous attendee. And the question that they're asking is, what is the maximum number of organizations for our consortium?
So we are not going to limit the max, tell you can only have this number of partners. But what is important is that you have a lead partner. So the lead partner is the organization that will deal with HIVA directly in terms of reporting, communication, evaluation of expenses, and even the audit or the verification of expenses process, that is the organization we are going to deal with. It's the same organization, the lead partner, that we are going to sign a contract with. Now, the lead partner will choose its own implementing partners. We cannot dictate how many partners they should be, but obviously we advise that the number of partners is manageable, and it's a number that an organization can work with without any issues, because then if there are too many, it might be a problem. So we will leave that to you to be able to decide. However, the implementing partners, you will list them when you're making your application and say, these are the people I'm looking to work with as a lead partner, and this is how we're going to work together. So you need to have had a conversation with the implementing partners or the partners you're bringing on board beforehand, so that you can be very clear what parts of the project they're going to be able to implement and what their work is going to be exactly.
Thank you very much, Wakiru. We have another question for you. And the question, let me just find it. I apologize. The question is from an anonymous attendee again. And the question reads, if an organization has received a grant from Music in Africa Live for 2022, is it eligible? And maybe we can just approach this question in terms of, we can talk about co-financing, as well as if you've received a grant from another organization, how do you interact with the program?
Yeah, so yes, you can apply even if you've received a grant from somewhere else. I think the thing that's not clear is whether you are going to be applying for the same project, but I will assume you are, and we will look at it as co-financing. So co-financing is where you already have received funds of a certain amount from this other donor, and you're looking to either expand your project implementation, whether it's you're expanding the reach or you want to have it for a longer period of time. And then you come to us and say, we would like for HIVA, in particular Ignite Fund, to be able to support this expansion or this other part of the project. So we are open to that, and yes, you can apply. Co-financing could also be that you have a certain amount of money already available for a project, but then you would like to be able to raise more money to support maybe the finalization of that project. So in that way, you would also be eligible to apply. So it doesn't matter whether you have received funds from somewhere else, you just need to demonstrate that you actually need those funds to be able to finish a project or continue with a project in a certain way, and we will review that based on how you demonstrate the need for funds.
Okay, thank you, Akiru. And while I have you, we have one more question that we forgot to cover, which was in our email responses. And the question was, can I partner with an organization that is based in the UK to apply for this fund? And maybe we can answer that in line with what are the countries that are eligible for partnership?
Yeah. So we have let me just pull that up. So we have the ACP countries, and that's the African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. So if you have a partner from any of those countries, you can apply with them. You can also apply with a partner from the European Union or within the European Union. And unfortunately, the UK is no longer part of the EU. So you would not be able to apply with a partner from the UK. However, any partner from the European Union or any other African country, even though it's not part of the list here, you could also apply with. So for example, if you're applying with a partner from, I don't know, Zambia, but then you're able to demonstrate that this project is going to be done in one of these ACP countries or one of these 14 countries that we have listed, then you would be able to apply.
Thank you, Akiru. And our colleague Olivia has posted in the chat the countries that are eligible for partnership, or other organizations from countries which are eligible for partnership. And for the sake of clarity, if you are partnering with an organization that is in any of, whether it's in ACP West Africa, ACP Central Africa, ACP Southern Africa, or you're even partnering with an organization from the EU, I mean a country in the EU, then you have to be the lead applicant. They cannot be the lead applicant. So organizations from the partner states cannot be lead applicants. They would be supporting partners in your application. The next question is for Kendi. Although we have already responded to it, but I'll give you an opportunity to interact with this question from David Tinning. The question is regarding the eligibility requirements to provide financial audit reports for 2017-2018 to the amount of 50% of the funds being requested. Why these years and not more recent audited reports? So I know you've already responded. So David, I'll just allow you to, if you want to switch your mic on, if you want to provide more context or more nuance to this question, you have the opportunity. If not, please give Kendi the go-ahead to respond to the question as is. I'll take silence as a go-ahead. So Kendi, I know you've already responded, but for the sake of clarity, you can respond again.
Yeah, so for the more recent years, which is 2021, 2020, there was COVID. And from our analysis, we know that the creative and cultural industries, that was not the best time for them for implementing projects. So they didn't implement a lot of projects. Also, there was not a lot of revenue, even for like the commercial enterprises that was being under that time. So we did away, or rather we disregarded the last 2 years because of COVID. So that only leaves 2019 going back. And then for EU, because they're the ones who set the criteria, they settled on 2017, 2018. So the more recent audit reports, we aren't looking at them because we feel like at that time, they're not going to demonstrate a lot, or rather they're not going to demonstrate sufficient revenues for you to ask for more money. So we felt like the years that people were thriving more are the years from 2019 going back. And those ones allow you to ask for more money, because if your revenues dipped in 2020 and 2021, and those are the years that we base your funding ask on, there's only so much you can ask for if you have to demonstrate 50%. But if you are thriving from 27 in the year 2017 and 2018, then your revenues are higher and you're able to ask for more funding, ask for a higher tier of funding. So David, the reason why the most recent audited reports are not being considered is because of the impact of COVID on most people within the sector.
Great. And at this point, I'd like to also mention to the panelists on the team, if you'd also like to hop on to any question and provide more context, please feel free to do so. The third question, I will respond to myself. It's from Daniel Fournard. Again, I apologize if I've gotten your name wrong. And Daniel asks, is it possible to receive funding for creating a platform? So yes, as long as the platform is within cultural and creative sector practice. So for example, what type of platform are you talking about? Are you talking about a web platform, for example? So if we look at it as a web platform, what type of web platform is it? Is it a video on demand platform? Is it a music streaming platform? Is it a platform that, let's say like an e-commerce website that allows fashion entrepreneurs to sell their goods directly to consumers? Or is it one for ticketing, for example, that allows musicians to sell tickets and merchandise to their consumers, and so on and so forth? So if it's along these lines, as long as it's tied to creative and cultural practice, and as long as your organization can demonstrate a track record in creative and cultural practice, and this goes to everyone who's on the call, not necessarily just people who are creating platforms. You also have to be able to demonstrate a track record of engagement in cultural and creative practice. Then yes, you can receive funding to create a platform. So I hope that answers your question, Daniel. We have another question here from Soita Bao. Kayare, and it is to do with eligibility. And because Kendi has already responded to this question severally, I'll just repeat Kendi's response. So Itabao, your question is, last year we said no later than 2017. This year, will it be 2018? No, unfortunately, the cutoff for registration is 31st December 2017. As we have mentioned on the call, if you do not meet that requirement, it is still possible for you to try and seek out partnerships, either within the country or outside of the country in one of the listed ACP member states in Africa or in the EU. But of course, if they are the lead applicant, then they have to be from this cohort, the 14 in Kenya. I mean, they have to be from the 14 in ACP Eastern Africa. So Itabao, if your organization is not eligible, I encourage you to either look for partnerships within your country of residence, and the lead partner should have met that eligibility requirement of having registered no later than 31st December 2017. We have another question here for Kendi. In terms of handling funds in 27 and 2018, does business turnover count? And that's from an anonymous attendee.
Yes, for the commercial enterprises, the business turnover does count, and the audit will be used to verify that 50% requirement that at least you've handled, or at least there's been turnover of, you've handled 50% of the amount that you're asking for. So yes, the turnover denoted in the audit will be used to verify and underpin that requirement, the 50% requirement.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
I can add something. It's just make sure that the turnover that you are going to demonstrate is coming from the cultural and creative industries. So whether you've sold a product or you are selling services, or it has to be in line with the CCIs as we have mentioned when we have listed them down.
Great. Thank you, Akiru and Kendi. The next question is from Moura Kirore, and they've put in 2 questions, so I'll respond to those. Could you please go over the process for joint applications? And we have another question: where in the application portal do I find the forms for joint application? Moura, I'll allow you to switch on your mic so that you can clarify if you're asking in terms of what are the logistics of doing a joint application, or if you mean what are the terms of partnership, because those are like 2 different questions. So if you're in a position to switch on your mic and clarify, that would be great. If not, I'll just assume you're asking about the logistics of doing a joint application. I'll take silence to indicate the latter. So with regards to joint applications, if you go on Submittable, when you sign up and create an account to apply for funding, and perhaps we should have mentioned this earlier, all our applications will be received on a platform called Submittable. I'll just ask my colleague from our comms department to put a link to Submittable in the chat so that you can access it. Once you create an account on Submittable, then you'll be able to send in an application. There is no different form per se for people who are doing a joint application or people who are applying as a consortium. It is all one form that just has a logic jump that allows you to, once you indicate that you are applying as a consortium, it allows you to go to questions that are more specific to the consortium itself. So if you, I'd encourage you to kindly watch our how to apply video because we've covered how individual applications can be done, as well as how group or consortium applications can be done. And I think my colleague has already put a link to the English application form, and she will follow that up shortly with a link to the French application form. And Olivier, if you could also link the how to apply video in the chat. And that video is a very comprehensive guide and answers not only how do consortiums apply, but it also gives you some tips on how you can make your application as strong as possible. So we are telling you that to be mindful of the word count. We are imploring you to go over the instructions tied to a question so that you're able to respond to it as comprehensively as possible, and more similar tips that help you put in a very strong application. So again, I encourage everyone on the call who has not had an opportunity to engage with the how to apply video to please engage with the how to apply video before you send in your application.
And maybe Maz, like if I could add to what you just said,
Yeah.
what Maz has just said is really important, because one of the sieving criteria, the initial sieve, would look at whether you followed what you have been asked to follow in terms of the application. So if you do not follow the instructions in the application form or as you are supposed to apply, then that would be the first sift. So it is really important that you look at those how to apply videos, so that then you increase your chances of getting through the several layers of selection process.
Yeah, thank you, Dionys. In fact, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, one of the most important things that was a huge disqualifier last year was people using their own templates to respond to our questions. So we have provided templates, in particular 2 templates. One we're calling a company profile template, where we get a better understanding of your organization and your as well as your project history. And we also have provided a budget template for you to fill in your project budget for this application. So please, please, please make sure that you make use of only those templates when responding to any question that asks you to upload a company profile or a project budget. The use of any other template will lead to the disqualification of your application. We have another question here from Nigeria Towet. And again, I apologize in advance for any names that I get wrong. And the question is, can an organization applying for a grant that covers more than one value chain, so for example, performance and celebration and cultural infrastructure, or do you only choose one value chain? So the question for value chain for us is to ascertain that you have a history of cultural and creative practice as an organization. So we want to know, if you say you are a cultural practitioner, what value chains are you engaged in? So that is the primary reason why we ask that question, because it allows us to place you and say, okay, this is a filmmaker or this is a musician. But we understand the nature of creative practice, and sometimes organizations or individuals, more often than not, can be more than one thing. So you'll find that you're a filmmaker, but perhaps you're also an author, right? Or maybe your organization does music production, but also does advertisements and radio ads, for example, right? So the way we've structured that question in our application form is we ask the first question, what value chain do you engage in? So you select your primary value chain, or the one you feel this is my primary practice, either as an individual or as an organization. And then we also ask you for your secondary value chain. So you're also able to tell us what else you do other than your primary value chain. Now, these questions in and of itself are just to place you and see if the value chain if you have the track record to deliver on the project that you're applying for. So in that sense, it is not a disqualifier. You can be engaged in more than one value chain. And it's even better if it demonstrates that the project you are applying for shows your capacity in the value chains you had highlighted earlier in the form. So that is not a disqualifier. We do not necessarily choose on basis of value chains. It's just so that we can understand who you are and what you do, and now gauge your track record based against what you said you engage in. So I hope that responds to your question, Nigeria. We have another question here from Tulanana Bohila. And the question is to Kendi. Salam Hiva team, what are the administration and project management demands of the fund on the recipients, and can those be covered by the fund?
Thank you for that question. Yes, there's the project and administration expenses. Those ones can be covered by the fund. So if you find that there's any staff time that's going towards the implementation of the project, if you find that in the place where you work from, the people who are working there, half the time they're working on this project and half the time they're working on another project, then you're allowed to allocate your rent expenses to the project. Any consumables that relate to the project also can be apportioned in the proportion to which they relate to the project. So yes, the administration and project management costs are an expense that can be borne by an expense that is borne by the project. Just make sure that the allocations are very fair and they're very relevant to the proportion of which those resources are being utilized for the project. So if you have a project manager, but then they're handling two projects, maybe half the time they're on this project and half the time they're on the other project, then their entire salary, you can't charge their entire salary on just this project, but you're allowed to charge the proportion for which is relevant to the project. So if it's half the time, then 50% of their salary can come from the project. So yes, the administration, project administration, and any consumables related to the project can be borne as an administration cost or expense by the project. Just make sure to be fair in the allocations and charge the proportions to which relate to the project.
Thank you very much, Kendi. The next question is from, just hold on, let me find my bearing. It's from anonymous attendee. And Kendi has already responded to this question, so I'll just respond to it. I am an individual freelancer and I just started my project a few months ago. So individual practitioners, sole proprietors are eligible to apply, right? But again, the caveat is as long as you were registered on or before 31st December 2017. So anyone who was registered after, unfortunately, would not be able to apply unless you go the partnership route. We have another question from Kendi, to Kendi from Priscilla Mbai. Hi, do the financial documents have to be audited by a Kenyan auditor? And the follow-up question is, our organization had a key project between 2018 and 2019, which was audited by project partners. Can these reports be used to apply for Ignite Fund? So as far as the financials being from 2018 and they've clarified and said the project was actually from 2017 and 2018. So their question is, they have audited statements and the audit was done by a project partner in 2017 and 2018. Can they be used to apply for Ignite Culture Fund? I hope I got your question right, Priscilla.
Yeah, so the spirit of the audit is just that we want to ensure that an auditor has verified that financial information being provided. So if the partners' auditors have verified, that means they've signed and stamped that audit, even if it was done by the project partners, that's all right, as long as there's an auditor who stamped it. So it doesn't have to be your auditor, but as long as there's an auditor who's looked over the same financial statements, verified and stamped, put their stamp and their signature. And in Kenya, there's also like a CPA number, put that against the financial statements. Those ones are good to go.
Great.
So yeah, it doesn't have to be your own particular Kenyan auditor, but as long as there's an auditor who's undersigned those financial statements, then they're good. They're good and they're verifiable.
Yeah, and this is applicable for any organization in any of the 14 countries, correct?
Correct. So it doesn't have to be your own particular auditor, but it needs to be an auditor. Someone has verified, someone with the audit experience and audit certification has verified and undersigned those financial statements.
Okay, thank you, Kendi. While I still have you, we have some more questions on the types of documents that we ask to see. So maybe we can respond to that question in two ways. I know we have some documents that we ask to see during the application, and I can respond to that. And then we have some documents that we ask now once people make it past the pitch stage. So and maybe then you can highlight what some of those documents are, Kendi. But at the beginning, when you are sending in your application, we've tried to make this application as light as possible in terms of the documentation you have to send in. So we are only asking you for 3 documents. The first one is a company profile. And the company profile should contain a breakdown of your organization, who is your team and who are the members on your team. And then also provide like your vision and mission statement as an organization, and give us your project history. So that the link to that can be found on the application form, but I will ask my colleague Olivia to kindly link us to the Dropbox, which contains this template for which we designed for your use. And then the second document that we ask for is the project budget. And before I even get to the project budget, with regards to the company profile, please make sure if you are in a consortium, if you're applying as a consortium, please make sure that the information requested in that document is responded to by all the organizations in your consortium. So not just the lead applicant, because we also want to get the same information for your partners. And then now we can move on to the second document which we request for, which is the project budget. So the project budget, we've provided a template, and that one is just for you to give us a breakdown of the amount of money you require and how you'd be using this money to deliver your project. And again, that should only be responded to by the lead applicant. But of course, if you are in a consortium, we expect that it will be a collaborative process to determine how the funds are used within the project. So they can feed in, but we are only asking for one copy, and that should be submitted by the lead applicant. And then lastly, we ask for audited financial statements in the years that Kendi has communicated. And so those are the only 3 documents that we require during the application stage. Now, once you make it further into the evaluation process, there will be some more documents that will be required of you, and I will ask my colleague Kendi to elaborate on what those are.
Thank you, Maz. So basically, there'll be like KYC documents, getting to know who the organization is, so their registration documents, their tax compliance documents, their tax certificate documents. We'll also need to know who runs the organization, so like the directors' IDs or passports. We'll also get to figure out if you have any credit reference, any references, so both on credit, like credit reference bureaus, or any letters of recommendations from people within your industries that you can share with us. The other set of information that we'll be looking for is like licenses. Do you have the operational licenses required to operate within your country and your jurisdiction? So it's basically information that allows us to understand understand who the organization is, the people running it, and also understand in terms of compliance. Are you complying with the licenses, the tax requirements? Are you a good, do you have references that say that your organization is a good organization, and also that the directors running it are good people? So it can be from CID, it can be from people within your networks. Any recommendation that you can supply us will do. But yeah, so it's getting to know about the organization and also looking at compliance documents.
Yeah, so like your registration certificate and things of the like.
Exactly.
Great. Kendi, while I still have you, Kendi, you're very busy today. You're in demand. We have another question, which is to do with the requirements that grantees or that are expected of grantees. So the question is, from my understanding, HIVA is a distributing partner in managing the funds and the grantees. What should the grantees be aware of about HIVA's agreement with the funders that will affect us as the recipients? So my understanding of this question is what is required of the grantees once they get into project delivery or once they sign their final contract. I'm trying to find the individual who asked this question. I am not able to see it. Please, if I have not asked or if I have not communicated the spirit of your question, please feel free to raise your hand and I will allow you to ask it in a clearer manner. But for now, maybe Kendi can respond to how I've paraphrased it. Oh, it's Tulalana, and they've raised their hand, so I'll just allow you to talk. Tulalana, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. So yeah, my question is in regards to just that, like this is what I understand is like a three-layered or three-tiered process from the grantors to HEVA to the recipients. And so if there's, like for example, you just noted, for example, there that you'll be checking other years, but EU say 2017, 2018. So is there anything else in regards to that we should also be aware of because of, let's say, that agreement or that will trickle down to us as grantors in that sense? So for example, my other question was that ties into that was like, for example, I know EU are quite strict about like pandemic rules. And there's that after effects of pandemic management. I've had other funding where they were like not allowing us to travel, for example, or being very particular about travel or gatherings and things like that. So I'm just wondering about those elements. Thank you.
Thank you to Lalana. And before Kendi responds, I'll also invite any other members of the panelists, particularly Dionys or Eric, if you have any responses that are that can shed a bit more light on EU requirements for grantees as well, that will assist Kendi in responding to this question. So yeah, whoever wants to take the floor first can go.
Sure. I can give a summary. So it's a lot of clauses. They're contained in the end contract that the beneficiaries get, and these clauses range from visibility requirements to communication, to procurement, to reporting, to just general grant management. But in summary, I think I would shorten that answer and say compliance. The things that are required or are stated in your contracts are drawn down from the head contract between us and EU, and so they've trickled down already to the beneficiaries. And so all that is required of the beneficiary is compliance with this requirement. So when it comes to visibility, if you're doing a workshop, if you're doing any kind of training, just having like EU comms material around. Also, when you're posting and addressing your audiences, just making sure that you also show that the project is being funded by EU ACP. And so all these requirements are contained in your final contract. Yes, they've flown down from the head contract, and the only requirement I think from on the beneficiary side is compliance with all these requirements. So there's like data protection, where if you're dealing with participants, you're supposed to have them either sign in or opt into giving you their information, and also commit to protecting that data and not sharing it with other third parties. And so there are very many clauses, and they are contained in the contract. I can just summarize the requirement as compliance with all these clause requirements.
Yeah, maybe
Dionys?
I can.
Okay, sure.
Oh, sorry.
You can go first, Wakiru. I'll respond after you.
Okay, we support the grantees. So when you get to the final stage, we organize a workshop, and that workshop essentially is to inform you of what is expected. So we go through we have a comms session, we have an M&E session, we have a finance session and procurement session. And ideally what it does is it breaks down what those requirements are, explains what the clauses mean, and in terms of reporting what is expected of you. So we will be able to support the beneficiaries to be able to comply. We also do a capacity assessment to assess whether the organization is in a good place to implement against these policies and guidelines, and if not, we support you and build your capacity to be able to do that.
Yeah, so maybe in addition to what Wakiru has said and Kendi, basically it's just what Kendi has said or summarized, and also just as a grantee, do not be worried. You will be taken through all the requirements of the grant, and these requirements actually build your business. The idea behind some of these requirements is to build your business to be sustainable post the grant. For example, with the audited accounts, if you didn't have those before, then you're able to have audited accounts, you're able to report on your impact, you're able to then have policies within your organization around procurement, around HR, around safeguarding, around data protection, as you've had earlier. All these things then build your business to be able to then be a viable business in terms of being able to apply for other types of funding, because you have all these things in place. Then funders, they could be innovative funds or banks, then look at you as a properly instituted business with all the policies, procedures, processes in place to be able to attract that kind of funding past the grant. So that's how we view it. It's positive. It is able to then, for instance, with the M&E requirements, where you report on the impact of the work that you're doing as a creative, you're able to show that you've absorbed the grant well and used it for the purposes it was intended for, and it's moving you from one level to the next. And that's what every other funder, including banks, want to see: growth, development, capacity building within your systems in the organization, and that's a good thing. So it's not nothing to worry about. We're here to support you with those requirements, as you've had from my colleagues.
Great.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I hope, yeah, Tulalana, I hope.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm going to take the opportunity to ask Mike other question.
I've seen them. I was actually going to them. There was one for,
Okay, fine.
does journalism count as creative industries? Well, loosely, yes, because if you look at the value chains we had shared, we covered books and press, and their newspapers count, newspapers and magazines, and TV as well, and radio journalism. Sort of they count, but the caveat here is, are they concerned with creative and cultural practice, right? So a sports journalist obviously can't apply for this funding, and unless maybe they want to cover like some element of cultural heritage sports that they want to bring to the forefront, then yes, and they still have to demonstrate that that has been their area of expertise. So if you are a journalist, let's say, and you work for instance, if you work for a magazine that highlights film or music in your country, or highlights traditional cuisine in your country, or things like that, there's a way then you can be considered, right? As long as you can demonstrate a track record of working in cultural and creative industries as a journalist, then you stand a very good chance of being eligible to apply for this fund. I hope that's clear.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Then we have another question from an anonymous attendee. Can the lead partner be a government institution like a museum? Yes, government institutions can apply. Again, the caveat is the government institution, as long as they are in the cultural and creative industries, they can apply. I'll give you an example. If you look at the list of grantees we supported last year, the final list of 19, one of them was a fairly old government institution known as the Bomas of Kenya, which are, for people who may not be in Kenya, just for the sake of a simple definition of what they do, they are like a cultural museum, but they are a state body at the end of the day. So we are open to working with and supporting state bodies, as long as, again, the caveat being, as long as they are in cultural and creative industries. So museums are eligible, ministries that are tasked with cultural and creative practice are eligible, state departments that are tasked with cultural and creative practice are also eligible for funding. We have a question from Charles Minor. Hi, does the fund support filming, i.e. documentary about forest conservation? So the fund can support pre-production. So if you're doing scouting, location scouting, if you're trying to identify where to shoot this documentary about forest conservation, and you want like the money to help you do that, then we can support that. But we do not support the actual shooting. So money that goes towards paying your cameraman, paying your crew, paying your sound people, paying your drivers, etc., etc. That one we cannot support. There are other funds that EU has opened that support film production, and they were very clear that they didn't want to have funds that compete. So that is why we cannot support film production, but we can support post-production and pre-production. And for the filmmakers on the call, I'm sure you're well aware of what we mean when we say pre-production and post-production. So the editing of your film, scoring, doing color grading, etc., all these things can be supported under this fund, but the making of the film in and of itself cannot be supported. And we have more information on that, I believe, on our fund information page. We have a section on film, which links you to the funds that support film production directly. Another question from an anonymous grantee. They had a graphic design for starting graphic design that has started in 2022. When is the next application? Unfortunately, you will not be able to apply for this year's grant, and you'll also not be able to apply for next year, just on the basis of the year you are registered as an organization. You will not be able to demonstrate the required financial track record to meet the fund criteria. So I would urge you to consider partnering with an existing organization, and that is one way you would be eligible. The third question we have from an anonymous attendee: can the lead company use audited accounts from a company they are partnering with? Kendi?
The question is, can the lead
Company, can the lead partner use audited accounts from a company that they are partnering with? So
it
let's
has
say,
to be audit of the lead company.
I see. Great.
Yeah, so the lead applicant has to be the one who supplies their audit. I don't see the utility in the lead partner using someone else's audits, because we assume that the lead partner is the person with the muscle, both institutional muscle and structures and systems in place to be able to unlock the opportunity for smaller organizations that are still formalizing. So they lead partners should be able to use their own audited accounts.
Great. Thank you, Kendi. We have a question from Jerry Mwangi. Can the creative and cultural education cluster also include work around advocating for policies around the creative industry? In fact, yes, we'd be very happy and keen to receive applications from people who are working in the policy space. Policy is a key issue, not only in Kenya, but in all the 14 countries. In fact, I'd even go as far as saying on the continent of Africa, we have a huge policy challenge when you're talking about cultural and creative practice. So these organizations are definitely encouraged to apply. If you have, again, for any organization that, and I know I'll sound like a broken record, but as long as you can demonstrate a history of engagement in cultural and creative practice, then you can apply for a policy a policy grant or a policy engagement under this grant, right? So you can be, for example, in your case, you can be an education cluster that your work has been upskilling businesses businesses or practitioners or even early entries into cultural and creative practice. Then you know what the challenges and shortcomings are with regards to like your specific area, which is cultural education. You know the challenges that practitioners face when transitioning from education into the sector. So you're very well placed to sort of articulate the policy needs for your group of beneficiaries. So Njeri Mwangi, I hope that answers your question. We have another one from an anonymous attendee. I want to ask about the application. Is the intention to help others with the grant? What if you have never handled so much money? I am curious, it feels like only the rich will be benefiting from this grant, or people who have handled so much money. And I want to open that up to the wider team, but I'll attempt a response at it. Well, the requirements are what they are. We have very little wiggle room on the requirements, and the reason why they're asking for a certain amount of funding is because we need organizations that can demonstrate that they have a track record of handling financing at the end of the day. this isn't an early stage fund. It isn't a seed fund. There are very many organizations who are engaged in doing seed funding, and in our history as an organization, we have also had a track record of doing seed financing. But this particular fund, unfortunately, we cannot align it with a seed financing mentality. And that being said, that doesn't mean that we are locking out organizations who cannot meet this funding requirement. As I've mentioned before, we have this caveat rather, where you can apply as a partnership. And in a partnership, a younger organization that does not necessarily have access to the level of requirements that we are asking for can partner with a more experienced organization or one that meets these requirements. And in that partnership, we not only foresee that you will only partner so that you can implement the project, but we also envision that there will be some level of skills transfer and knowledge building from the older organization to the younger organization. So in that sense, we are still targeting to help organizations who do not meet this requirement, and we are encouraging organizations to consider partnerships in this regard. But I will also open the floor to any member of the panel who would like to respond to this question.
Oui, Mars, permettez-moi de répondre en français. Si je parle français, si on est ici, s'il y a l'interprète, c'est parce qu'on est. Je me demande si vraiment il y a mes frères francophiles ici, parce qu'on reste conscient que l'industrie culturelle n'est pas assez développée dans certains pays, comme l'île Maurice. J'ai vu quelqu'un c'était sur Twitter qui se demandait pourquoi il y a pas de créatives du Burundi. Au Rwanda, on s'est demandé la même chose. Mais si les deux langues aujourd'hui, on pense à vous, on pense aux autres pays qui n'est pas assez développés, en tant que par exemple le Kenya, le Ghana ou le Nigeria. Donc on est là pour vous. Et c'est pas pour les Richards ne sont pas dans cet appel, je crois bien, parce que déjà ils sont les assauts, pour ainsi dire. Mais si on est ici, il y a une subvention, on reste conscient qu'il y a nos frères qui sont des créatifs et qu'ils ne sont pas des moyens. C'est pour cela que l'Union européenne, en collaboration avec tous ces autres partenaires, donne cette subvention pour vous aider. Et si mon collègue Max parle de partenariat, c'est parce que dans la conception, on a remarqué, on a pensé que, attention, il y a des sociétés qui ne sont pas expérimentées, mais si ton grand frère qui est bien expérimenté, qui a assez d'expérience, qui a assez de sous, qui a eu à un certain moment un financement venant de, je sais pas, Trace Africa, quelque chose comme ça, et aujourd'hui, il y a une subvention, on vous encourage de collaborer, même pas, mais au sein de votre pays, mais au-delà de votre pays, mais non pas juste d'autres pays en Afrique, mais tout en collaboration avec d'autres pays, même dans l'Union européenne. Donc, ça veut dire que vous pouvez même voir d'ici 17 août, chercher sur Google, chercher sur Instagram, parler entre vous, nous consulter en tant que conseil britannique. On a des contacts, vous pouvez collaborer. Pour beaucoup, vous voyez pas, beaucoup vous pensez pas que la subvention est là pour les grandes sociétés, organisations, mais c'est pour tout le monde. C'est pour tout le monde, c'est pour l'Afrique. On parle de 14 pays, mais vraiment, après, si vous pensez bien, c'est pour collaborer pour que ces 14 pays aient au moins des opportunités. Merci.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Anyone else from the team who has anything else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we've also broken down the fund into 3 tiers. So there's the first tiers, which is a fixed amount of 30,000 euros, which means that for an organization applying, you need to have at least handled 15,000 euros previously. So we have done that to be able to access even organizations that haven't been able to handle the larger amounts, which in this case would be a minimum of 90,000 euros. So I don't want to add what my colleagues have said because they've really covered it very well. But we have broken down the funding into 3 tiers, and that allows for an organization to gauge where they are in terms of size, capacity, and decide where they would be best fitted to make the application.
Great. Thank you very much, Wakiru. We have 2 other questions from Tulanana. Can you apply with a partner that has already gotten Ignite funding previously? The short answer would be no. And then because they are currently implementing, so no. And then the second question is, are for-profit organizations eligible? Yes, but we do require that any profits that are made from the project are rolled back into the project. Can anyone from either Kendi or Akiru provide a bit more clarity on that clause? And we don't have to do it now. I can move on to another question and we can revisit it. But if you feel comfortable to respond now, please feel free.
Maybe
Yeah.
just to say that yes, for-profit organizations are eligible. However, with the money you receive from this facility, you should not make a profit in that sense. Like Maz said, the money should be, you should be able to declare the money, and that the money should also go back into the project. So at the end of the period, we will be evaluating that if you're a for-profit organization, and we will have to determine the best use of funds going forward.
Great, thank you. And then there's another question around the eligibility criteria. For the criteria for choosing 2017 and 2018 makes it an unfair playing field. Some companies in 2017 and 2018 really struggled but thrived in 2021 and 2022. How do we level the playing field for such? Because Kendi has already covered why we chose these years for audits. I won't go into that, but I will say again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, how do we level the playing field for people who haven't met any eligibility requirement around audited statements or year of registration? And the short answer is partnerships. Any organization that has been functioning in cultural and creative practice has of course interacted with organizations perhaps who have similar goals, or who work with similar beneficiaries, or have a similar dream and vision in mind. So I would really encourage seeking them out, perhaps bringing them to the table and presenting a project which you can collaborate on and apply for Ignite Culture. We have another question here, and I'm just going to run through them very quickly in the interest of time. So we have one from Cinelab Academy. So if you haven't made up to 50% of example 180,000 euros in revenue in 2017 and 2018, does that mean I won't qualify for the grant? So now, how to look at the 50% requirement is, how much do you need as an organization, right, to implement your project? The amount you need, you have to have met at least 50% of that amount. Now, if you realize that your organization needs 180,000 euros, and 50% of that is 90,000 euros, and you can't demonstrate that, then our advice would be to revise your need, right? And say, okay, then maybe I won't go for 180,000. Maybe since I can only demonstrate 60,000, I'll apply for 120,000 euros. So that is how to look at the 50% requirement ask. And I hope that makes sense, Cinelab. Tulalana, we have another question from you. We have evidence of grant funding from 2021 and we were registered in November 2017. So does that mean we should only provide evidence in 2017 and 2018? Again, Kendi has already covered eligibility, audited statements from 2017 and 2018, registration 31st December 2017. Unfortunately, there is no wiggle room around that. We have a question from Lydia Okobwa. Can M-Pesa statements be considered in the financial statements, especially if using mobile banking more than banks? Kendi, would you like to respond?
So the requirement is audited financial statements, and the audited financial statements usually encompass so it's a summary of what transactions you've been doing over the year, and then your auditor puts them consolidates them together in 3 financial statements, or rather in 3. Yeah, there are 3 financial statements, which is the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow. Sometimes you might have the equity statement as well as like property and equipment kind of a statement. But the main 3 are the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow. So it's a summary of those M-Pesa transactions being put together into like an income statement format, and then being verified and stamped by an auditor to signify that these are the official financial statements for that company for the year 2017 and for the year 2018. So you can't forward us the M-Pesa statements by themselves, but your auditor can summarize these M-Pesa statement transactions and come up with the audited statements, and come up with the 3 statements that we're talking about, put them in a document, and verify that they've checked and they've agreed that that's the financial position of your organization or your company.
Great, thank you. We have another question here from Bender Brian. My inquiry is on the part of audited financial statements. If, for example, my company is into audio and visual production, and my financial statements show a turnover accumulated from creative and cultural activities, but for this specific call from Ignite, I would love to venture into skilling and training creatives. Will my application hinge on my ability to execute a project in something different, but works hand in hand with what my company is working on? Thank you. Again, Brian, as long as you can demonstrate a history of cultural and creative practice in your case, for example, if skilling and training is not your core competence, then my advice would be in your application, it would be to demonstrate how you would meet this gap in competence. So you can say, as an organization, we work in audio and visual production. That is our history, that is our background, that is what we are most conversant with, right? Now we want to train people on what we know. So if you do not feel that you have the expertise in-house to do this training, then in your application, for example, you would demonstrate, and we've given an allowance for that, for you to demonstrate that as a company, I will either hire a tutor who's very skilled in audio and visual training, for example, and then we will work together to create a curriculum, for instance. And I'm just sort of giving how this could sort of look like or work. So if you cannot demonstrate, if you have the overall competence in an area, but there's a skill that you require in your area of competence that perhaps you feel you do not have, then we'd encourage you to look at hiring consultants to fill in that gap. But as it stands right now, your project, in the scenario you've given, you're eligible to apply. I hope that answers your question, Brian. We have a few more with regards to eligibility. When the project says 2017 and 2018, does it mean either or together? As in, could you use financial statements for either year, or you have to provide for the 2 years? Candy?
So here it's the requirement is that you provide audited statements either for the year 2017 only, so 2017 only, or 2018 only, or both 2017 and 2018. The implication is that the more, or rather, if you provide at least for 2 years, then you signify or you demonstrate that you've handled a lot more money, and so you're eligible to draw down a lot more. So if you have for both years, do present for both years. If you only have for 1 year, that's all right. If you even have like for 6 months for the year 2017 and then a full year 2018, that's all right. So just provide all provide the 2 if you have the 2. If you only have for 6 months for either of those years, that's all right. If you have a full year, maybe in 2018 only and not 2017, that's also all right. So the implication is that if you provide for both years, then there's more revenue demonstrated and you get to draw down more. So that's up to you and your strategy. But for both year 2017 and 2018, they're eligible. If you have both, do give. If you only have 1 year, that's all right. If you only have for 6 months during that same period, that's all right.
Great. Thank you very much, Candy. I will rush through the next couple of questions just in the interest of time, because we are doing a bit badly, and I'd like us to end at 2. So we have 2 questions. One that's along the lines of eligibility from Adam Abraham Kitaulwa, our organization started as part of a religious setup in 2007 and registered as an NGO in 2019. Are we eligible to apply? Unfortunately, no. If you are registered later than 2019, 31st December 2017, you're not eligible to apply. But if the company that you are part of from 2007, if they had registered before, they can apply for project funding as long as they can demonstrate a track record in cultural and creative practice. Emmanuel Nsaba, can companies that create technologies that enable virtual production be supported? Yes, in fact, one of our current grantees is in AR and VR. And Emmanuel Nsaba, I'm sure if you're in this field, you're familiar with those terms, augmented reality and virtual reality. So those are eligible. In fact, what you're saying with the rest of your question is eligible to apply. We have another one from an anonymous attendee. Our model of training is expedition with photographers into the forest and community. With this model, is this model eligible to apply as we train photographers with mentors while producing what they are trained? I apologize. I don't fully understand your question, but I'll ask that we, Olivia, if we can put our comms email, our email address in the chat box, so that anyone who has any questions that we are unable to respond to now, either for in case because of a lack of clarity or because of a lack of time, if you can put our email there, and people can now send us their questions via email.
From my understanding of the question, I think he's asking about the structure of the project or the training, how they carry out the training.
I see.
And I just wanted, we do not restrict you. So however you see fit, because you're the experts in the field, however you see fit to do the trainings, that is up to you. The only thing I would say is it needs to be aligned with the objectives of the project and within the value chains we've listed. So because I'm already seeing you're in the photography space, and there's an aspect of mentorship, and I guess production for the photographers, then it feels like it is eligible. How you carry out the training is for you to inform us, because we are open to whatever innovations or ideas you come up with, as long as they're relevant to that field.
Thank you very much, Wakiru, for providing clarity on that question, and for the response as well. We have one last question for today, which is from Jerry Mwangi. Can an organization submit a solo application and also, a solo application as a lead partner and also as a partner in another consortium? Does anyone from our compliance team want to respond to that? I believe the short answer would be it's not advisable. We would have serious questions about your capacity to deliver both as a lead partner and as a lead applicant and as a partner in a consortium. And from where it stands right now, it would put your application at a disadvantage. So I would advise that you put your eggs, even though the common saying advises us not to, but I would advise that you put your eggs in one basket with regards to this application. Yeah.
Maybe I can just build on to what you're saying, Maz.
Yeah.
As you mentioned in your presentation, we had 373 applications.
64, yeah.
Yeah, and now we shortlisted that of 19. So if I were that Jerry Mwangi, I'd focus my efforts in one application, which I know will succeed. We have a 5-tier selection process, so it's rigorous. So as you have said, I'd advise that you focus your efforts in where you feel you're best able to then demonstrate that you'll be able to use this funding for the betterment of your organization and sector. So yes, you're right, Manson, saying.
Yeah.
Great.
Also to add, we are very keen on people declaring conflict of interest, particularly with the applications we receive. So if there's a conflict of interest that's detected at any stage, then that would put your applications at a disadvantage. So I would say, or you would be asked to, choose one, or, decide on where you would prefer to stick to. So we would advise that, as my colleagues have said, to just stick to one, and yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to bring the Q&A session to a close. Oh, sorry, we have one request from Eugene Kavuma, who says we have restricted access to Facebook in Uganda. We apologize. Is there another way we can access the recording? Olivia? I believe Olivia is typing a response, but perhaps it would be faster if...
Yeah. So we can work on making the video available on YouTube. Once that is available, we will share it on all our social media platforms, the link to the YouTube page, so that you can then watch it on YouTube. Thank you.
Great. Eugene, I hope that is a sufficient response. With that, I would like to bring our session to a close. We have spent the last an hour and a half responding to questions, and I hope that you feel the questions were well responded to, and that you feel you're at a better place to engage with the fund and its requirements. Thank you all for making time. We do not take it for granted. And we will be making this recording available so you can return to it and review any one stage. We thank you all for your time and for your questions and for your energy and participation. And we wish you all the very best as you go to apply for the Ignite Culture Fund. One last thing to mention is please make sure you properly familiarize yourself with the requirements of the fund. And also please make sure you watch the How to Apply video, as it will likely improve your chances of making it further along in the evaluation criteria. So thank you very much, and we look forward to interacting with all your applications. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Kwaheri. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Congrats, Eric and Dionis. First call. Y'all did great. Let me just hop off real quick.